fertility crisis at the moment, and then we're going to go into a couple of other things. But this is our last segment for the day, which is a bit of a shame because I'd like to, continue this conversation for the next day because there's so much to talk about. And Andrea, let's continue that conversation about fertility crisis. And you said, there's 1 in 5. There's maybe 2 women that might be infertile. There's maybe 2 men, and there's that 1% otherwise.
Sorry, Faye, I think I confused you with that. What I meant by that is that statistically, there's normally I'm trying to think of how to explain that in a different way that makes a little bit more sense. But essentially, half of the reasons, so 40% of the reasons why those statistics are the way they are is related to female factor, 40% of it is male factor, and then 10% is a joint problem, if that makes sense. However, I think that the challenge is, and I'll cycle back to what we were talking about all the reasons why we're having this fertility crisis. The challenge is that even if the fertility problems lay on the male side, everything that is being done is still being done to the woman. Right? So say a man has poor sperm quality or has a really low sperm count so that it doesn't have, that there may not be a fertilizing capacity to his sperm production. And while men don't have so much of a sort of ticking clock or a biological clock that women do with their age-related fertility decline, it still is significant for men. And what the research shows is that after about 46 years old is where we see a dramatic decrease in the quality of sperm and an increased risk of chromosomal disorders and recurrent miscarriages and everything else that are associated with that. So men do still have an age-related fertility sort of change. But the parameters in which we look or analyze sperm is 50-plus-year-old technology, despite so many advances in the understanding of sperm production and function and everything else. And according to the World Health Organization, a man's semen analysis only has to have a 4% good looking morphology or normal formation of sperm. So in the whole sample, only 4% of it has to be normal for it to be considered a perfectly fine sample. So men are often told that everything is completely fine when in reality,
it isn't.
I don't think that's actually the case. And that's actually the 5th percentile of what should be considered normal. And we know that if men have less than 11% normal forms, that it has a really high risk of not being responsive to, reproductive medicine. So their risks of things still going wrong if they don't have good sperm is still so high, but it's their partners that have to have everything done to them. So we're still subjecting women to multiple medical procedures and drugs and surgery and everything else, even if the problem lies on the male side. And I think that improving sperm function and quality and everything else is the easiest thing in the world compared to all of the different factors that are associated with female factor infertility. So, when I'm working with couples, if the problems are on the male side, I find it much, much easier to correct. But that's just, what I've found anecdotally with my experience with my patients.
Why is the research not being done? 50 years. Why isn't the research not being done now so that things can change and make it easier for both female and male?
Good question.
Yeah, God.
And Faye, there's new research coming out every single day about, fertility and reproductive medicine and, factors to improve all sorts of different things. And I'm certain that it will change eventually, but there's just a really big long lag time. So just like with everything else.
Maybe the scientists need to pick up their game and really do it, or are the the majority of scientists men, and they don't really want to deal with it. Maybe the women should step in and deal with it, so it makes it easier for the man to be fixed.
Great. That's a great idea, Faye. I'm not entirely sure. But there's always a lag in terms of everything catching up to the latest research. So, there might be some really great, compelling evidence that is really good evidence-based factors, that's reproducible, that's ticks all the boxes, but then normally it takes 17 years for that information to then be filtered through to the relevant people who need to change their processes or whatever it might be. So that everything takes time, I guess.
17 years is far
17
too
years
long.
on average is how long it takes for there to be changes that sort of happen within medicine. But
it didn't take 17 years for something in the last couple of years, did it? We're not going to go there, though. Okay. Don't want to talk about that. What about, because, there's a fertility crisis and everything like that, and you said that the women were getting older and their fertility changes around the age of 35 and onwards. They're a little bit less fertile, and as they get older, if they get over 40, there can be complications and there can be other things that happen with childbirth. The
older a woman gets, unfortunately, the higher the risks for health complications for her, but also, chromosomal issues that might be affecting the developing embryo, the increased risk of miscarriage and everything else. But even just structurally, as women age, their pelvic bones over time start to change biomechanically to represent more of a male type pelvis. So a woman's pelvis, so men and women have different pelvis, and they start to deviate around sort of their puberty years, where that male pelvis will become really strong and straight and everything else, whereas the female pelvis will start to resemble one that is what we call obstetrically relevant, which means that it has all the right angles and flexibility and everything that would be ideal for sort of childbirth, and that peaks around 25, and does a woman's fertility peaks around that kind of age 25. Now, I don't know a lot of 25-year-olds who are ready to have children, but as we age, as women get to sort of age of about 40 to 44, that pelvis starts to revert back to the angles and the biomechanics of a male pelvis, which is why childbirth can be a little bit harder as well. Obviously not impossible, but even just biomechanically, it gets harder to have children as we get older as well. But there's so many different factors that affect sort of that age-related fertility decline and things that contribute to that as well. So it is one of the biggest obstacles that they're up against. But a woman's chronological age and biological age don't always have to be the same thing. And I've work with women who are in their late 30s, 40s, who are really healthy and have got really good egg reserve. Or if they don't, then we're working on egg quality, because if we don't have quantity, then, obviously we just want to make sure that we're maximizing egg and sperm quality and everything else, so that we're trying to tick all the boxes to help make conception as easy as possible.
Okay, let's move on to perimenopause and menopause, and what does that mean for every woman?
I think we've taken a fairly good sort of transition through there. We've sort of talked about oral contraceptive, we've talked about the teen years, we've moved into the fertile years, and now we're kind of transitioning out of that into perimenopause. And the perimenopause is like a woman's second puberty. It can be a really tumultuous, hormonally dramatic time of a woman's life, because things are changing so much. And it's kind of this no man's land between their cycling years of when they're fertile, but then they're not necessarily, you know, fertile anymore. You know, they may or may not be ovulating, but they haven't stopped their period. But they're getting all of these signs and symptoms that we would normally associate with menopause, like hot flashes or night sweats, or they might be getting sporadic bleeding, or really all of a sudden really heavy bleeding that they've never had before. They might notice changes in their moods or their brain, or their metabolism might be changing, and that all of a sudden they're, you know, one of the most common symptoms that I hear from women in perimenopause is, I've gained 10 kilos. I've never been this weight in my whole entire life. I've always been, you know, say I've always been 65 kilos my whole life. And now this is what's happened. I don't recognize this body anymore. What is going on? And there's all sorts of reasons for that. But these changes that happen at perimenopause can be really distressing for a lot of women. And the actual label of perimenopause, or this sort of transition period, has only just recently been medically acknowledged as being an actual transition time, or an actual distinctly different period in a woman's life from her fertile years to menopause. And it is distinctly different. And one of the first signs of perimenopause is a shortening of a menstrual cycle. So a woman, you know, might be having, say, a period every month, every 28 or 30 days, and then all of a sudden it's coming maybe every 21 days. And she might be having much heavier bleeds than she's ever had before. And that's sort of come out of, you know, quote unquote, nowhere. And the reason for that is because the first hormone that changes in perimenopause is progesterone. So all of a sudden we get this declining progesterone, and we have this period of elevated estrogen for a period of time. So we have this kind of hormonal big ebb and flow that goes on. And depending on the woman, she'll either have lower testosterone or increased testosterone, just depending on that woman. So all of those factors can really change for women. And we have to treat this woman very differently to one that is either in menopause or during her fertile years, because her body is different. And then once we get to menopause, as I said before, it's simply just a retrospective diagnosis. It just is 12 months without a menstrual cycle, and that is menopause from then on. And one of the keys, or the secrets to sailing through perimenopause and sailing through menopause, is actually to nurture the adrenals, which means keeping your stress under control and living for yourself, not self-sacrificing to everybody else like what you've done for the last, you know, however many years. Because historically, this would be a time where, for women, the kids have left home. They're done having their babies. The kids are out of the house now, or almost out of the house. So now this is a time where she gets to actually spend time looking after herself. But because, again, we're having babies so much later, we might have a woman going through perimenopause who still has toddlers. So her sleep is compromised. You know, she's stressed to the max. She has 5 full-time jobs with those 2 kids, you know, a partner and a, you know, maybe a career and everything else. So is it any wonder that women are an absolute hormonal mess at this stage? And, you know, we can't do anything about the fact that she's got toddlers, but there's ways that we can keep her system really, really balanced. And this is a time not to take your health for granted, because those things will absolutely sneak up on you. So this is a time where I really encourage women to be working with a, you know, healthcare provider that they really resonate with, that will help them to feel balanced and for them to achieve their goals and not feel like they're losing control of their body.
We do tend to not take care of ourselves because we're mothers and we're nurturers, but we're nurturers of others instead of ourselves.
Exactly.
And we have to learn to be able to take care of ourselves. And that's not a selfish thing, because if we don't look after ourselves first, we're no good to look after anybody else. And as you say, with all that stress and things that we bring upon ourselves, when, you know, we're always nurturing someone else instead of doing something nice for ourselves, it triggers other things in our body, particularly when going through menopause.
Exactly. And, you know, that's part of the beauty of being a woman, you know, is the fact that we are, you know, so soft and nurturing. And it's that, you know, it's part of being a mother is the putting everyone else before ourselves. We're so good at that. But this is a time in our life where that will absolutely smack us in the face, and we have to really prioritize our own self-care. It means that we can't get away with some of the things that we've done previously. And it is a time where women have to prioritize exercise and, sleep and eating in a way that's going to be conducive for hormonal balance. And I find that the women who don't have a regular sort of movement or exercise regime before this time really, really struggle, because it's much harder to start something if you've never done it before. So, that would be my first little tidbit for advice for all the women listening is simply just start moving. Just grab your girlfriend and go for a walk or whatever it might be, just to start those things straight away. And gosh, the things that we can change and the advice that I give women, there's so much that they can do to help them not feel like they're losing the plot or that they're losing control of their bodies. And it is really important for them to sort of start to look after their health.
Now, before we finish up, you have a podcast. What's it called?
So the podcast is called Wellness Women Radio, and you can find it on any sort of podcast medium or app, so iTunes, Spotify, any of those sort of things. And my co-host, Dr. Ashley Bond, and I have been releasing or recording the podcast for, I think, somewhere between 5 to 7 years. I've lost count. There's, I think, almost 300 different episodes so far of all things similar to what we've talked about today in a lot of detail. And that's probably a really good resource if there's a certain topic that you're thinking about that we haven't necessarily covered today. Like, it could be polycystic ovarian syndrome or fibroids or ovarian cysts or whatever it might be, then I can bet you we've covered it.
Yeah. So that's a really important thing for people to go and have a look at. But how can they get in contact with you?
Via my website, which is drandrea.com.au. So drandrea.com.au. I'm also on social media. So on Instagram at drandrea.xo or The Period Whisperer on Facebook as well.
And that's a nice name for you, The Period Whisperer, because we've talked about that, made reference to it a lot today. And I think that anyone out there listening needs to re-listen to this. There's the Facebook Lives that you can go onto my Facebook and listen to, and the podcast will come out at some stage too. It's something that we as women need to take care of ourselves and be aware that our bodies are important and we have to lessen our stress and understand how to nurture it from a young age, not when we're older, but from a young age, which makes it more prevalent when we're older. We just naturally go through the process. I'd like to say thank you very much for your time, Dr. Andrea Huddlestone. It was fabulous talking to you. We will hopefully you'll come back on the show at some stage and talk more about lots of different things. I'm Faye Waterman. This has been a conversation with Faye, and I'll be back